This Choircast podcast is brought to you by Heretic 2 by Matthew J. DiStefano. Ready to challenge everything you thought you knew about faith? In Heretic 2, I dive into LGBTQ affirmation, rejecting divine violence, and embracing universalism in a bold post-Christian perspective. If you're done with outdated dogma and want a justice-oriented, inclusive view of spirituality, then this book is for you. Get Heretic 2 wherever books are sold, and start rethinking faith today.
Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast, your journey, actually our journey together beyond inherited beliefs to a spirituality that works for you. I'm your host, Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. We can fix that later, right? No? You've made it to another book club episode of the Unbelief Podcast, and today I am recording this at a place called Spa Beach in St. Petersburg, Florida, because I am at a stop on the How to Not Suck book tour. If you want to come and see me talk about in person the new book, How to Not Suck as a Christian, you can go to howtonotsuckbook.com, and there is a place where you can ask for the tour information, and we'll send you an email and let you know how to come see this in person. But if you hear some waves or some kids screaming in the background, that's what's going on. We are in the middle of exploring a story that seems right for this moment in time. It's a story where things have gotten really hard for people, where the people who are really trying to do what God has asked them to do are being oppressed. It seems unreasonable. There is an authoritarian leader that is just being awful, and all of that helps us process who we are and where we are whenever we are. But right now it feels helpful because this story is a story of redemption, of things turning around, and of the fact that when things turn around, they are often still hard. It's just a different kind of hard. So that's where we are going. This story is the story of the book of Exodus in the Hebrew scriptures, in the Old Testament, in the Christian Bible. It's part of the Torah, the sacred text of the Jewish people as well. And we are going to talk now about chapter 5. If you remember, in chapter 4, Moses goes to the Jewish people and gives them the signs and wonders that God has given Moses to show them. And when he does, they're like, yes, this is great. No questions asked. You are it. God is sent a deliverer. And so we're sort of going on the heels of that story into this moment where now Moses and Aaron go in to talk to the Pharaoh. And in chapter 5, verse 1, they go strong right at the very beginning. They walk in, and it says, after where Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh, and they said, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go so that they may celebrate a festival to me in the wilderness." And, they go in with the confidence of two people who just had a big win, and it came off without question. And, God had said, go do this. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to help you. And so they're like, oh, man, that's going to be easy. So they go with boldness into the throne room of the most powerful person in the world. And it's like, dude, God said to do this. Now do this. And, not surprising to anyone except maybe Moses and Aaron. The Pharaoh's not used to being talked to like that. They they don't read the room. They go in on a high from this other thing that is not the same thing. They walk in and they just miss it. I don't know about you. I've totally been there. Right? The success in one thing, or just coming off of a high and walking into something and carrying the same energy that I had in the other meeting, in the other setting, and it just just bombing. And that's what happens. Like, Pharaoh's response is, who is the Lord that I should heed him and let Israel go? Like, how dare some tiny God I've never heard of try to command me? Also interesting here, both in Exodus 5 verse 1 and in verse 2 here, you'll notice if you're reading a text, almost all texts do this, there is this way they write the word Lord sometimes, where it's a case called small caps, where it's big capital L, little capital O, little capital R, little capital D. And when you see that in the original text, in the Hebrew, it actually doesn't have the word Lord there. The word for Lord in Hebrew is a word called Adonai. And Adonai is a title, right? But in Hebrew, there is a proper name for God. Like, my proper name is Jeremy. God has a proper name just like that. That proper name is Yod Ha Vav Ha. It's four consonants. And so it's not pronounceable. Like, you put four consonants together, it's not a pronounceable word. And it's intentionally not pronounceable because in the ancient world, the idea was if you knew someone's proper name and you could speak to them with that proper name, that somehow you were an equal or they were below you. And so God has this name that is unpronounceable, and it's unpronounceable because it shouldn't be pronounced. That's what they believe. You don't say that word. So instead of saying that word, they would say the word Adonai. Now, it's interesting, though, if you actually look at a Hebrew Bible, this four-letter name is called the Tetragrammaton. This four-letter name of God actually has vowels on it. And those were added later. In fact, vowels were a later addition to the Hebrew language in general. But the vowels for this word, if you know and understand ancient Hebrew, it doesn't look right. These vowels don't belong next to these consonants. And that's because the vowels aren't actually part of that word. The vowels that are added to the Tetragrammaton are the vowels from the word Adonai. And the reason it was done that way was to remind the people to say Adonai instead of trying to pronounce this name. And which is really interesting because if you did pronounce that word, the vowels from the Tetragrammaton the consonants from the Tetragrammaton with the vowels from Adonai, it actually would look like Yehovah or Jehovah, which is funny because Jehovah's not a real word, right? It's a word that was meant to remind them to say Adonai, which is funny because of all the Christian posters and talk about Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Raphi. They're using a word that isn't real. But whenever you see big capital L, little capital O, little capital R, little capital D, it's actually that word. It's the proper name of God. And so Moses says, thus says the Lord, using the proper name of God. But Pharaoh said, who is the Lord, right? He's not using the title. He is using this proper name of God, referring to a specific God. And that's important because if you read this, you could imagine that they are all talking with these anonymous words. Of course, maybe Pharaoh doesn't recognize, like that word could mean anything. But it's not. It actually is the proper name of God there. And so what happens now is that Pharaoh responds with, basically, I don't know this God. I've never heard of this God. And how dare this God try to direct me this way? And you get this sense that Pharaoh's reaction now is taking things in a different direction. And when they begin responding, when Moses and Aaron begin responding to Pharaoh's response, their tone changes, right? And you can catch this in English. It's also really pronounced in the original language. But they have this sort of apologetic, conciliatory tone, and which makes you feel like there is this interplay. There is this like, okay, Moses and Aaron came at Pharaoh, and not surprisingly, Pharaoh responded, angry. And so in some ways, their approach is partially responsible. Of course, ultimately, Pharaoh is responsible for his reaction. But it's like everything else. It's complicated, right? And their response to him shows something, I think, even deeper, because they have a realization of what might be ahead and how hard it is going to be. They said, okay, please, please let us go 3 days journey into the wilderness to sacrifice to the Lord our God. And then it says, or he will fall upon us with pestilence or sword. Did you hear that? That pronoun? Us? Yeah. Because, sometimes when someone makes a bad decision, sometimes when there is an evil person at the helm, and they are acting out of their lack of integrity, out of their lack of righteousness, out of their evil heart, it's not just them and their cronies and their followers that suffer. It's actually everyone, right? Everyone suffers. And oh my gosh, it's sad and hard and tragic. And it is the way life is, right? Right? Sometimes you have a person in charge, and even if you have access to them, even if you can go up to them and say, hey, this isn't good. This isn't the way the things should go. This isn't the decision you should make. This is hurting. This is bad. This is like not righteous, whatever, evil. You go up to them and you warn them, and they still do it. You don't get credit in the universe for doing that a lot of the time. Like, there's going to be bad stuff happen as a result of it. Bad stuff that you could see on the horizon, and that bad stuff isn't just going to happen to them. It's going to happen to you too. And so in some ways, when you have that kind of clarity, when you're asking them to change, you're actually not just asking them for themselves. You're also asking them for you and for your people, right? Bad stuff is going to happen because of you and your decisions. And it's not just going to happen to you. It's going to happen to us, all of us, you and me and all of these people. And man, that is so hard to be in that position, to see the way that these decisions are going to affect and hurt and harm people, and to do all that you can to stop it, knowing that it's probably not going to stop. And it's not just going to be the person that is evil that is going to suffer. It is going to be the good people that suffer as well. It's so hard. So hard. Then in verse 4, it says, but the king of Egypt said to them, Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their work? Get to your labors. Oh my gosh. Like, this response, from Pharaoh is like just dripping with sarcasm and contempt, right? How dare you? Don't stop them from working. And then, he switches from like them to you, right? He's saying, he's treating them as slaves, like with the rest of all of these Jewish people. And he's like, get back to work, slave. Whew, man. Yeah. Pharaoh's doubling down. He's ramping things up. He is leaning into his anger. And that's a thing that we can do, right? Somebody comes at us, and for whatever reason, it hits us the wrong way, and we have an angry response, and they dial it back. And they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry," you know, like they're conciliatory and change their tone. But we are so caught up in our anger that we can't let go of it, and we just keep leaning into it, getting more angry, responding to them now, not out of something that seems proportional to the way they are acting. But now you are ramping up when they're ramping down. Oh, man, I've been there. And when you do that, right, when you let go of that control and you just let your anger run away from you, you make things 10 times worse. That's what happens here with Pharaoh. He starts calling them slaves. He says, like, how dare you try to get them to stop working, and sends them out. Get out. Go. And it's like, and then it says in verse 6, and this is important, it says that same day, right? You get a sense that like Pharaoh is not stopping with the anger. He is let it go, and he is just, that's it. We're going to do it. It's on, right? And he goes and he says, okay, that same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people, as well as their survivors, you shall no longer give people straw to make bricks as before. Now, let me pause for just a second here. There's a little bit of a misunderstanding in this word straw. So, you have to have straw to make bricks, like mud bricks. You can't make it without straw. But there's like multiple words for straw, and this is a specific straw, like chopped up straw, like straw that's sort of been prepared for bricks. We just have the word straw. So this is the accurate translation, but there's more to it. And so like Pharaoh's not giving them an impossible task, right? Pharaoh's giving them a much more labor intensive and difficult task. We're not going to provide you with the chopped straw anymore. You've got to get the straw. And that's why when they get this, and the taskmasters tell them this, it says like they scatter throughout the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw, right? It's the prepared straw for the bricks, not just the like raw sheafs of straw, right? So Pharaoh does the thing. He keeps doubling down. He ramps it up, and same quantity of bricks have to be made, but just without us giving them this prepared straw. And then he does something that authoritarians everywhere have done and continue to do. He says, do not diminish it, for they are lazy. That's why they cry out, let us go and offer our sacrifice to God. Oh, jeez. That's the thing. That's the thing that authoritarian leaders do. They don't address the issue. They don't tell the story about a people feeling damaged and oppressed. They don't accurately try to talk about what's going on. No. They say there's a character flaw in the people that are asking to be treated justly. Yeah. Instead of dealing with the issue, saying he refused to be a just ruler, Pharaoh says, no, they're lazy. Yeah. Demonize people instead of talking about the issue. Because talking about the issue is going to make them look evil and unreasonable, right? And when you say, oh, they're lazy, that's why they're not doing their work. When you punish them for not doing their work later, it's because they're lazy. It's because they have a character flaw, right? That's what's going on here. And so what happens is they appear, at least in their own head, that they are doing the right thing. There's lazy people. They got to get to work. One scholar said, by ascribing to the oppressed a character flaw, one is relieved of the burden for their fate. Yeah. And it's easy when you are someone that is just sort of in the system and you are trying to navigate everything, to hear a leader say, oh yeah, these people are lazy, they are criminals, they are whatever, and say, oh wow, I mean, like, of course he's gonna give them more work to do. They're lazy, they're not doing that. Or like, oh, of course we're gonna put them in jail, they're criminals, right? And it's really easy when you are in a system that is being run by an authoritarian leader to get duped by this, right? It's called a straw man fallacy. Like not a straw man fallacy, an ad hominem argument where we're attacking the character instead of dealing with the issue. And in this case, just making up a character flaw. And so we don't have to deal with the injustice and the evil of the way we are acting, the way we are dealing with the situation. We just keep leaning into the character flaw. And it's really important when you're in an authoritarian system, when you have an authoritarian leader, to be on the lookout for this, right? Whenever they say that someone is, or some group of people are criminal, are evil, are lazy, are stupid, are whatever, when you hear those statements, to like, take a step, take a breath, and take a minute to look. Wait, are they actually this way? Or is there something else going on that is being covered up by this logic fallacy, right? You've always got to be on your guard when you're listening to an authoritarian leader, because this happens all the time. And so that's what happens. The taskmasters come, they tell the people try to make the bricks without straw. It doesn't work. They can't meet their quotas. Of course, the Pharaoh then continues to call them lazy. Like when it happens, when it's impossible or feels it's not possible to meet their quota, people go to Pharaoh and they say, hey, look. You're asking us to do the same thing with less resources. We can't accomplish it. And Pharaoh says, no, you're lazy. Go get back to work. And, when they do that and they're rejected, then of course they go to Moses and they're like, dude, Moses, you're supposed to be freeing us, and you're the way that you acted towards Pharaoh has made it harder on us. Like, how is it that you're supposed to be freeing us, that like our lives are supposed to get better and easier, and they're getting harder? Like, what's up with that? And then Moses takes a complaint to God and says, God, what the hell? Like, why are you doing this? You said, right? You said this is what we were supposed to do, and now this? And I think it's important to pause there and just say, yeah, like, that's justified, right? The people complaining to Moses, that's okay. Things are hard. And your leader took an action that made it harder. Complain. They aren't being rude or ungrateful or unspiritual because of that. And when Moses takes the complaint to God and like challenges God and says, like, God, you agreed to this, you called me to this, and now it is this hard, that's totally legit. Like, Moses says, oh Lord, why have you mistreated this people? Why did you ever send me? This is in verse 22. Since I first came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, verse 23, he has mistreated this people, and you have done nothing at all to deliver your people. I love this because, like, Moses isn't holding back. No, he's like, no, God, like, why'd you even send me? Like, if you weren't going to do anything. If you're just going to let things get harder, well, the heck, like, I did what you said. I went to Pharaoh. Things got harder, and guess what? You did nothing. Like, you said that you were going to deliver us, but that didn't happen. So what, you gonna make good on the promise, or are you just gonna ignore us? Right? That's sort of the tone that Moses has. And that is, I think it's really important for us to look at that tone and realize it's okay. Right? If you are angry and you're angry at God, there's nothing wrong with being angry. There's nothing wrong with expressing that to God. You are not sinning or evil or somehow unspiritual because of that. No. Give it out to God. God's big enough to take it, right? If God exists, then God's got to be able to deal with this. And this is why it's in the Bible like this. Right? There's lots of examples of when people feel like God isn't keeping up God's end of the bargain. They call him on it. Yeah. I can tell you, I've had times like that in my life when it feels like everything's falling apart. And in those moments, I'll be just like this. I usually start like, God, I don't even know if you exist. I don't even know if this is me talking to the air right now. But I can tell you this, like, this is not working for me. And it feels like you asked me to do this. And like, yeah, what's up? Like, either I'm wrong, or you don't exist, or you're just not doing what I feel like you said you would do. So what is it? Right? That's okay. So many examples of this in this ancient spiritual text, all the different books of the Bible. Yeah. And sometimes God responds right away. Sometimes God doesn't respond right away. Sometimes the prayer hits the ceiling. But here, God responds immediately. Chapter 6, verse 1 says, the Lord says to Moses, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. Indeed, by a mighty hand he will let them go. By a mighty hand he will drive them out of his land. Yeah. And that's what they're hoping for, right? You know, like how I said this was a book club episode? Well, you know, for it to be a book club, it's got to be the club. It's got to be the place where you're talking about it. We actually have a place like that. It's called Not Church. It's called Not Church because it's a place for people, however they claim to identify spiritually, agnostic or atheist or Buddhist or whatever, Christian, ex-Christian, not sure, still figuring it out, however they identify, to explore spirituality, to find beliefs that work for them, and nobody's going to yell at you until you're going to hell because you don't believe the right thing. And so that's what this podcast is. Like, it's for everybody, but also the book club. Talk about it there amongst all kinds of other things in this wonderful, supportive community. I think you'd love it. If you like this podcast, this is it, right? This is the kind of stuff that we deal with and how we support each other through all of this. The way you can be part of that community is you go to Discord, you go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. That's patreon.com/skepticpastor. And it's $3 a month. It's $3 a month because we're not going to ask you to give us some percentage of your income. It's pay for what you get. And, you know, if it works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, just stop paying. It's okay. Yeah, so that's how you do that. We've got some funny merch. noomacommunity.com/store, NOOMA community.com/store. Wherever you hear this podcast, give us all the stars. Even if you can, take just a second and write some actual words as a review. That kind of stuff really helps. That's it. That's the podcast. Shout out to the Choir Network, to Patheos, to Matthew and Keith, who make everything happen. Now, get out of here. Go do something to make the world a better place. Okay? We'll see you next time.